Hello everyone, my name is Edgar and I am the Urban Ag Outreach Manager here at City Sprouts. And today we're going to be talking about two important things. One of them is going to be direct seeding, so we're going to be putting seeds directly into the soil. And we're also going to be talking about transplanting. That's when you take a plant from, you started inside the house or perhaps in a greenhouse and you're going to take it outdoors to plant it. So the first thing we're going to do here is when you're talking about direct seeding, more than likely you're going to be placing the seed directly into the soil, either with your hands, or in this particular case, we're also going to be using tools such as a hand trowel. We have several different models. There's basically whatever you feel comfortable using. You're going to be using these devices here to be able to make a furrow into the soil. So the first seed we're going to start with today is going to be the radish seed. As you can tell, these are fairly small. Um, Berry seeds come in different sizes, obviously, but what I would recommend is whatever you're going to be planting on the soil, always keep the seed packets handy. The seed packets will give you specific information about how deep the seed needs to be planted, the soil conditions, perhaps even the time of the year that need to be planted. So in this particular case, again, with the radish seed, we're going to go ahead and just make a quick furrow on the soil. Doesn't have to be any specific depth. And then you're going to take your seeds and you're going to space them out. Again, the seed packet will be specific enough to tell you how far apart these seeds need to be placed. But once you get them placed in your furrow, you're simply going to come back and you're going to cover them up. Now, the important thing when you're covering up these seeds, you're going to lightly pack the soil back into the ground. Make sure that the soil that you're working with is nice and fine. Like here's a good example of what we're working with. You can see that the soil is fairly fine, not very grainy, as opposed to something like this. Something like this is not really ideal for your seeds, especially when you're direct seeding. And the reason for that, this type of soil is going to have too many spaces or gaps in it, and it's not going to give you good contact with the seed. The seeds that we want to have a good contact with the soil is the reason it's important is because we want to be able to speed up the germination process. And also another quick tip: once you're putting down your seeds, if you have any rain upcoming in the forecast, it would be a good idea to use that into your advantage. Natural rain is a good source of irrigation for your seeds. Now, should you find yourself in a situation that, let's say, you don't have the best soil, let's say that your soil looks like this, a little grainy, a little blocky, a little choppy. One of the things that you could do to make it a little better for your seeds is you can add something such as biochar. You could even add compost into your soil as well. We ourselves here, that's exactly what we use at our farm. We use biochar, we use compost, because that gives you an immediate change into the soil, which makes it a lot more finer, and is going to give you much better seed contact when you're planting your seeds. The other seed that we're going to be working with today is going to be the cucumber seed. As you can tell, these are not very small, they're fairly large. You can grab them with your hand. And there's no need for you to make a furrow into the soil with for this particular seed. You can actually just use your hand. What I would recommend is probably make a hole with your finger, probably no more deeper than the first knuckle. And you would just simply make a hole, place a seed, cover it up, and then you're going to continue the process all the way throughout the entire space of you're going to be using for your planting. And then once you're done, simply come back, lightly pat your soil. Again, you don't need to compress it too much. And again, the reason you want to give it a light tap is so we can have good seed contact from the seed into the soil. The other seed that we're going to be working with today, just to give you another example, is going to be the beet seed. As you can see, the beet seeds are slightly different. They're a little bit more chunkier. They're a little bit more textured. But once again, you want to go ahead and with this, you can make a furrow. Once again, just make a nice little trench in your soil. You can grab them with your fingers and then put them down, space them accordingly to your seed packet. I cannot stress enough that each individual seed packet will give you specific instructions for the seeds that you're working with. Once you have these seeds spread out, once again, you're going to come back, lightly cover them with soil, and lightly press it down. And again, once you're done with this, one of the other things that I would highly recommend is make sure that you properly irrigate these seeds. You want to have good watering in your soil. The good moisture is really, really important for the germination process to start. And then once you have it planted, come back in a few days and you should be able to see your seeds germinate and sprout. All right, so we've already taken a look at direct seeding. Next, we're going to move on to direct transplanting. This is where you're going to start your seeds indoors and then transplant your plants outdoors. Or you start them at the greenhouse and then transplant them into your field. So we have a couple of examples here today. We're going to be starting with some collard greens, some kale, and some lettuce. Now the example that I'm going to give you here, we're going to actually plant them all together in the same row. Normally you wouldn't do something like this. You would actually plant the same variety of plants in the same row, and sometimes even in the same bed altogether. So each one will require a separate bed altogether. But just for an example today, we're going to plant them all together so you can see how pretty much the process is the same for any plant. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our plants. We're going to make sure that they're nice and watered. The reason that you want to make sure that these plants, before transplanting them, are nicely moisture and water is because one of the biggest problems for these plants when you get transplanted is that they go through plant shock. Plant shock is the #1 enemy that's going to prevent your plant from properly developing after it's been transplanted. Chances are that if it's not properly watered, your plant can even die. So you don't want that to happen. So once you get your plants nice and watered and they're moisture, the next step is you're going to make sure you make your holes. Now the holes themselves don't have to be super deep. They just simply have to be big enough to cover the size of your pot because that's the soil that's going to be transferred. So once you make your hole, nice and deep, you're going to take your plant and you're carefully going to position your hand over the plant, flip the pot over, give it a good tap, and it should come back right out as a one whole pot. Now before you plant these plants, you're going to go ahead and you want to just loosen the soil a little bit. This alone is what is required by the roots to be stimulated so they can start developing in it. Obviously, you're going to put them in new soil, so you want them to continue developing to a bigger spot. So once you do that, you put the plant down, gently put the soil right back around the plant, and then just simply tap it down a little bit. Again, you don't want to press the soil too hard because then you're going to compress it. Compressed soil makes it a little bit difficult for new roots to develop, so obviously you don't want that. The next plant that we're going to put down here, we are going to do a nice lettuce. Once again, you're going to make a hole that's just as big enough for this new pot to go through. And if you're not really sure if it's big enough, a quick little tip is just take the entire pot, put it right into the hole. Does it look like it fits? In this case, it does. So you're ready to go. Once again, position your hand over the plant, flip it over, give it a nice tap. And once again, you want to go ahead and loosen the soil just slightly, not too much. Again, we want to develop and we want to stimulate these roots so they can grow a little further. Once again, make sure the hole is nice and roomy. Plant around it, put some soil down, and lightly tap it. And again, the spacing between each plant is going to heavily depend on what you're working with, whether it's a specific variety of kale or a specific variety of lettuce. You want to make sure they're spaced out properly. But again, this is just an example to show you that the process for either one of these plants is going to be virtually the same. So once again, you want to make another hole that's deep enough for the new plant to go in. Put your hand over it, flip it over. And again, once you have your soil, gently press it, loosen it up. So the roots are going to love this. Place it right back into the hole. Put the soil around it. And just like we talked about earlier, you want to have that good seed contact with your soil. Well, you also want to have good contact between your roots and the new soil. So that's why you want to make sure that the soil is nice and soft, lightly pressed, and you're done. Now, once you get this done, the next step is, although you already got these watered before you planted them, you still want to come back here and you want to irrigate them again. These plants require water. Water is going to be the best defense against shock from these transplants. And then once you're done, check your plants in the next few days. Make sure that the progress is going good. Then before you know it, you'll have a harvestable crop.